Arkansas, Mr. Hill.
Thank the chairman, thank the ranking member. Appreciate the opportunity to follow up on Mr. Pittenger's good work here in the House and Mr. Cornyn's good work in the Senate. And there's no doubt that with the changing strategies by our adversaries in finance and economics, that CFIUS has got to catch up with that and be very clear and intentional in how our review process is done, and also not burden the committee's efforts to the point of too much congestion, because you are asking for a very broad increase in the types of transactions that you'll review, and I hope that Congress is well aware of the staffing that you need in order to adequately do that work should this proposal become law. And I also have said before on this topic, no doubt America for 60 years, as you said, has led the world in market development, transparency, global trade, and at the same time, carefully protected things that we consider integral to our intelligence and security requirements. With that said, I want to bring up this recent transaction on Broadcom-Qualcomm, because I think this is an issue where we have to be very clear, and you said Congress can request a classified brief and all this. We have to be very clear about why something's in the national security interest as we look at each of these transactions, and since that one is in the news now, it gives me a chance to talk about something that was in the letter regarding it. In the department's concern list, it said that Broadcom could take a, quote, private equity style direction if it acquired Qualcomm, which means reducing long-term investment such as R&D and focusing only on short-term profitability, close quote. That sounds more like an opinion to me. And in sort of indicting a business strategy or a business model rather than the national security concerns. Should Congress be suspect of private equity investors from a national security point of view? Who wants to tackle that? Sir?
I'll tackle it. So the answer is not at all. Every transaction goes through the specific analysis. So I would encourage everyone not to read anything more than other than the particulars of the transaction as to the specific. And I would also encourage you to undertake the classified briefing, because then it'll put everything into much greater context. But what I will say is that we regularly clear private equity transactions, and I don't suspect that would change.
Right. Well, I think that's important because, business people, you're right, this right now is a voluntary submission to the committee for review, and we want that as clear and transparent and easy for those companies and their lawyers to anticipate this so that we do maintain that international flow of goods and services where America is a leader and not bog down transactions that don't deserve it. And so when people see a business model kind of question, you can imagine the lawyers at your former employers asking, oh my gosh, we've got to do a CFIUS review, or are we micromanaging the private sector by this, because you are going to broaden your reach. So I think those are things that as we talk about the exact language in the bill, we need to be sensitive to that, and certainly the report language and the direction to the executive branch of what we mean in Congress. Let's be clear and intentional about what we mean in Congress. And I love the joint venture addition. I think that's been a loophole for a long time. I like the intellectual property licensing piece. I like the careful scrutiny of subsidiaries that are in other countries that have a different ownership. I think those are all improvements. But when you think about joint ventures, like a code sharing arrangement in airlines and things like that, clearly with national carriers out there, they are in countries that are not necessarily always in favor with the U.S. government. Can you reflect on that subject when I guess that's a joint venture. It's certainly a memorandum of understanding to share revenue on passengers, but talk about a little bit like that where it's very open. These are, for the most part, public companies in the United States who are entering into those. Who?
Sure, I'd be happy to address it. So first of all, I think that the joint venture provision right now in FIRMA is pretty clear. It requires the depositing of intellectual property along with associated support. So in many joint ventures that don't have anything to do with intellectual property, they wouldn't be brought into this. And secondly, we've been meeting with industry groups, as I mentioned, other stakeholders, members of Congress, to make sure that this provision is narrowed through technical amendments to get at those transactions that are really most likely to raise national security issues.
Well, we appreciate your service to the country in protecting the national security and intelligence assets of our private sector and public sector, and thanks for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The gentleman's time